Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're on question number 162 for DevOps and SRE interviews. We're doing this so that when you get in front of your hiring manager or a technical interviewer, you are ready. You feel confident that you've covered most of the topics that could be asked of you during a DevOps or SRE interview. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. That's free for you, but it's a big help for my channel. So I would really appreciate that. Okay, as you know, I've done my research, and these are the top 15 topics that showed up on job description on LinkedIn based on 35 jobs that I looked into. Cloud is number one, CI/CD is number two, and at the bottom we have system design and containers. Even though the ones at the bottom are not as important, they're still important because these are, like, as you can see, even from just 35 job descriptions, system design came up 17 times. So it is not something we should ignore. Of course, you should focus on the top five or so. Um, that way, you're more likely to get questions on that. Today, we're on number 11, Kubernetes. But in my experience and my intuition, Kubernetes should be ranked way higher, maybe number 4 or 5, because that is the technology that people are all moving to. And especially if in a small company, startup company, they're going to Kubernetes to begin with. They're not even bothering with any virtual machines or such things. So the question today is kind of advanced. How is OIDC, also called OpenID Connect Protocol, integrated with Kubernetes? Well, basically, what this is all about is, and it'll make more sense as I give you the answer and give you the more details. But essentially, what you're trying to do is you're trying to tie in an open source authentication with your Kubernetes application and over your cluster. That's the idea. That's what the interviewer is looking to see from you, whether or not you have some idea about how to do this. So again, it's kind of an advanced question. So if you don't get all of it, that's okay. Nobody expects you to know every single detail about this particular topic. Friendly reminder, floydspencer.com. He is my career advisor. He is giving away a 1 hour free session to anybody who's on the job market. I'm not financially affiliated with him. I just care about what he does because he's passionate about helping people in the job market today. Okay, so first of all, what do we get out of using OIDC? First, we get a centralized identity management. That means you don't have to have multiple places where you were managing your users and what privileges they have. We also have simplified integration within something that you already have. Maybe you already have Google Workspace, or maybe you already have Okta. So tying these identity providers with Kubernetes cluster makes your job way easier and quicker. Another one is, if you have this kind of authentication, you're automatically tied into what's called the JWT, token-based authentication, which is really, really effective in keeping your applications secure. Now, what do you have to do? First of all, you have to choose a provider. Let's say Google or Facebook or Okta or Azure AD, whatever. There's so many of them out there, right? Generally, what happens is you already have one in your company, so you tie that into managing access to your Kubernetes application or cluster, right? So you have to then figure out a client ID. Means your application becomes, or Kubernetes cluster becomes a client that has an ID and a secret, and it's a redirection, right? And you've all seen this before, where you go to log into a new application on internet, and you say, hey, do you want to use Google? If you already have Google, you can use this. You have Facebook. That means they have already figured out OIDC for their application with a backend provider like Google or Okta or Azure AD or many others, right? So what you have to do on the Kubernetes side, on the Kubernetes API side, you have to do the following, and I'm not going to go through and read these things. Essentially, what it comes down to is you are giving your provider an URL to go to redirect the traffic. You have to you make a client ID so that the provider knows that where it's going to send to. It's going to know, well, what client we're talking about. And you also have an username and group claims that are useful for what's called authorization. That's a different topic for another day. But you have to provide those items to your existing OIDC provider like Google or Microsoft or what have you, so that you can tie them into. And the last 4 lines here are just examples of the 4 items that you have to configure on the Kubernetes side. Okay, little bit more about how it's going to flow. So what's going to happen is the users, when they try to authenticate, they're going to get redirected to your OIDC provider. So let's say Google, right? And that if your user already has a Google account, it's going to get he or she is going to get a token, and that token is going to come back to the Kubernetes API, so that now you have a relationship between the client, the user, right, who has a token from Google. Now that token is actually recognized on the Kubernetes side, right? Even though you didn't set up a user on your by yourself on in Kubernetes. So what happens is, and then once you have that, you can then tie that into a role-based scenario, meaning that's already available for you in Kubernetes. You don't have to build that; it's already there. You just have to say, hey, this role is called admins, and if this user is this, that user is automatically goes into the admin group, right? Those are roles that are automatically tied into, as long as you configure them, meaning you define which users get into which groups, right? Here's an example code for that on the API side of Kubernetes. Of course, I'm not going to go through that. If you zoom in on that, you can see some of the things I've already talked about. They're kind of in the code itself. Now, what happens on the Kubernetes side, Kubernetes will actually verify that the token that the client browser is giving you actually is valid, and also has the right keys, and also it hasn't expired. Though when those verifications are done in combination with the provider, meaning in this case Google or Okta or what have you, then the authentication is complete. And then your picture of the OIDC tying into Kubernetes cluster or application is now complete. Okay, if you have further questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'll try my best to answer them. Or if we want to, if you want me to cover a particular topic, this particular topic came from a user, so that's why I did this video. If you want me to cover a particular topic, just leave a comment below, and I will see you next time.